Hello. Just want to share a few thoughts with you out of Module 1. Not saying that these are any important than any other topics covered in Module 1, but these topics stood out to me. We'll start with financial statements, and just want you to be aware that financial statements are merely historical data. It's historical information that tells us about the past performance of a company. Now, it's beneficial to us because it lets us know how that company has performed, how it potentially has the ability to perform in the future. Now, it's no guarantee, but if we've had sales last year, more than likely we're going to have sales this year. If we've purchased a building, next year that building's probably still with us. So financial statements give us good information. They just happen to be about the past. But we can take that past information and help us make some predictions about what will happen in the future. So they're good for helping us make business decisions. And just remember that our financial statements are going to be used by management, creditors, investors, government, and other entities, people that have an interest in what the organization is doing. Keep in mind that we have private companies that produce financial statements, and we have public companies that produce financial statements. And simply what we mean by private companies is those are non-public companies. Their shares are not traded on a national exchange like the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. Those are probably your smaller businesses. They're not necessarily smaller, but smaller in the sense it's not like a Walmart. But smaller businesses, generally your local gas stations, your local restaurant, those are private companies. They're non-public. Then you have the public companies. Those are the ones that are traded on the national exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange. Those companies have responsibility to report to the Securities and Exchange Commission, whereas private companies or non-public companies don't. Now, both types of companies follow GAAP. Okay, so they're very similar in that the financial statements that are produced here in the U.S., we'd expect those to follow U.S. GAAP, which is produced by the Financial Accounting Standards Board, the FASB. They help set the rules as to what generally accepted accounting principles are. Now, they're not the only group, but they are the major group, and there's some other ways that we get GAAP, but just in general, think GAAP comes from FASB. Other publications maybe that come from the AICPA, and just general practice of companies, just a general practice of how companies handle their accounting, that can create GAAP as well. Now, we have U.S. GAAP, but I also want you to be aware that there's international accounting standards, and those are called IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. And that's an allowable way to produce financial statements, just as U.S. GAAP is an allowable way to produce financial statements. Now, here in the U.S., financial statements will come out according to U.S. GAAP. Financial statement-wise, there's 4 basic financial statements. I want you to keep in mind there's the balance sheet, the income statement, statement of cash flows, and the statement of stockholders' equity. And those are 4 general purpose financial statements. The balance sheet, often referred to as showing us financial condition. It reports 3 broad categories of accounts. It shows us information about assets, which are the resources that the business owns, like land and buildings, cars, cash. Then it reports liabilities, which are debts, where we owe creditors such as a bank, or maybe we have commercial paper, which is where we owe people that let us borrow money through a regulated market. And then we have owner's equity. Those accounts also show up on the financial statements or on the balance sheet.